Café. I think we're about ready to get started here. Today's session is going to feature Dennis Plummer, our CEO, Liz Kaplan, the Westside Emergency Housing Center Director, and Neva Contreras, one of our Westside Emergency Housing Program Directors. So without further ado, I'll let you guys take it away.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're joining us here in Albuquerque. If you're not local, it's starting to become a beautiful springtime. In Albuquerque, we get a lot of wind in the spring, and that means a lot of allergy season for some individuals. And that includes me this year. So I apologize. My voice is a bit scratchy. That's kind of developed over the afternoon of today. I'm excited to have with me today two really critical staff in our operation at the Westside Emergency Housing Center. In addition to our two staff that I'll introduce momentarily, we also have a guest who was a volunteer and has done some very interesting work at the Westside. And so we will be introducing a special guest today. But I'll start first off with a brief overview of actually the timeline of how the Westside Emergency Housing Center came into operation. Out on the west side, on the West Mesa, is a very large abandoned jail facility that the city of Albuquerque converted to emergency shelter a number of years ago, prior to when Heading Home took over the operations. We did so in 2017 as an agency. Heading Home took on the operations that ran from November 15th through March 15th each year. So just a winter shelter. This was for families, women, and men. And then in 2019, the city agreed with us and was gracious enough to fund extending that operation to become year-round, so that when March rolled around, we did not have to close as we had previously in the past. As you can imagine, in the desert, the high desert, the temperatures of heat in the summertime are as dangerous as are the cold temperatures in the winter. And so by being able to operate year-round, we found that running the Westside Emergency Housing Center was able to serve a far greater number of people in need. Then, as we all remember, 1 year ago this month, something spectacular happened around the world, and that was the COVID-19 pandemic set in. This drastically began to change our operations at the Westside Emergency Housing Center. So moving first from the November to March, then to the year-round. In March of 2020, we added 24-hour service on site. That meant that people no longer had to travel back and forth from the West Side into the community. We were really challenged by the idea of everyone needing to self-quarantine, and without housing, you don't have an option to do that. So we, with the city and many partners, it was actually a 30-person multi-agency, government, nonprofit, for-profit, the hospitals. A team came together and we began meeting every day, Monday through Sunday, to coordinate efforts in this pandemic response. So what we did was we opened up COVID pods. At the far end of this facility, we were able to isolate 3 units for people who were symptomatic or positive, or if we were waiting to get back test results. So this allowed them to isolate and quarantine safely. We also were faced with the challenge of reducing the density. So we had to move people further apart. At the time, there were 70 beds, bunk beds, so top and bottom, within individual units. So we needed to space that out. But we also had a greater number of people needing the services. And so what we did in March was we opened up 3 additional community center shelters. The pandemic had closed down community shelters in our communities, and so the city allocated 3 of those, and we moved into those units those who were most at high risk of COVID. So people of 65 and older, people had comorbidities, and we were able to relocate them into these 3 community centers and subsequently space people out who remained at the Westside Emergency Housing Center. In June of last year, those centers began to be reopened to the general public, but we still had this high need of the lower density at the west side. And so we moved the community centers to hotels. So we then opened up what became a family's hotel shelter, a wellness hotel for the general single population. And the city with the medical teams were operating 2 more medical hotels, which Heading Home was the support staff for those units. And those were for people who were actually COVID positive or in need of close proximity to the hospital in case their oxygen levels crashed. So it's been quite the whirlwind of operations. Currently this March, we are now, the Westside Emergency Housing Center is still operating for single men and women. The blue pods are still operational for the COVID needs. We operate 2 wellness hotels and 1 family hotel. The family hotel will continue at least until we believe June of 2022. And we're negotiating the continuation of the 24-hour operation of the Westside Emergency Housing Center. So that's a whirlwind and a lot of information, and we'll have time for questions at the end of this time together. So as we continue to present, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat, type them into the comments at Facebook, and our wonderful host, Kim, will moderate questions as they come in and make sure that we get to those. So that's the big picture of how the operations is functioning, how it's been used over the years. We have amazing staff in the personage of Liz Kaplan. Liz actually worked for Heading Home back in 2017. She was a director at the Albuquerque Opportunity Center. And when we began thinking about taking on the West Side, Liz took it upon herself to go undercover and go through as a client, experiencing the operations just to get a feel for what was happening there. And Liz came back a very strong advocate that Heading Home take on the operations at the West Side. So we are very grateful for Liz now to be the executive director at the Westside Emergency Housing Center. And Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, my name is Liz, as Dennis said, and yeah, I'm very happy to be back with Heading Home and heading up the Westside shelter operation. And I've got a great team of staff, 4 wonderful program directors. I've got a great team of supervisors and monitors and outreach people that help put the show on every single day. And it's a lot of hard work, and I'm very appreciative of all of them, and just to be here.
So Liz, you know, we have a lot of partnerships that make it possible to run. Why don't you walk us through kind of a typical day in the life of who's eligible to come, and how do they get there? And once they're there, what happens?
Well, anyone is eligible to come. It's a low barrier shelter. We don't require any sort of identification for admission. If you need a place to lay your head, we are available. So anyone is welcome to come. A day in the life, well, it is again a 24-hour operation. And we have buses that depart the Westside shelter in the morning at 6, 7, and 8 to take any guests who would like to be transported into town. They can get on one of those buses and be taken into town. Typically, the drop-off is at Coronado Park and then guests can make their way to other services that are in that general vicinity. There are a lot of services for those experiencing homelessness in that area. So it's a good location for picking up and dropping off. For those guests,
I would just add there too, you know, one of the theories behind keeping people connected to the community is exactly that they're already connected with services in Albuquerque. So we don't want them to isolate out at the Westside Emergency Housing Center. We want to keep that loop connection of individuals going to their service providers, going to see their medical providers. So that's some of what you're talking about, correct, Liz?
Yes, that is correct, exactly. And then for the guests who decide to stay in for the day, they have different opportunities. They can meet with our outreach team to get help with accessing resources, other resources in the community. They can stay and just relax. We've got TVs that can be watched, books to read. The city brings in lunch and dinner every day for the guests that stay. For breakfast, we have breakfasty items that we put out every morning. So that's kind of, a day in the life. And then for those who wish to return back in the evening, those same buses pick up at Coronado and some other locations, but primarily Coronado at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we have buses making that run starting at 2 all the way till 7 in the evening. And we also have a transport van in the evening for any late stragglers, or if we are called by a hospital or APD to transport someone to the WECH, then we can have our shuttle take care of that transport as well.
And two of the really critical components, I think that, especially because of COVID, that are happening at the West Side is we actually have now a medical team, not heading home staff, but UNMH, the Medical Reserve Corps, that are operational daily on site. And so that was begun initially just to add healthcare for the homeless, their visitation, First Nations, their outreach to us to provide services. We realized there was a higher level of need of an immediate response under COVID. And so that team has used the West Side as a launch site for testing. We've also used it for vaccination site. So in the 1A category of those receiving vaccinations, frontline staff were among the first, going far back as December, beginning to receive vaccination. And that includes not only staff, but our residents there. So that has been an amazing operation. The second component is behavioral health services. If you're like me, this year has been trying to be locked down by yourself. So my mental health, I think all of ours collectively, has had a real challenge. Imagine experiencing that in a shelter congregate setting. So Neva, who's with us today, is one of our other staff who leads another critical component. And Neva, I'd love to invite you to talk a bit about the outreach services that you're a part of.
Hi everyone, I'm Neva Contreras. I'm a program director here at the Westside Shelter, and I'm also the director of the outreach program we have here. And to kind of cover our outreach, when it first started and when it first hit the streets, we were out there letting everybody know on the streets, and the guests that stay at Coronado Park, we gave them flyers, let them know about the Westside Shelter. The flyers contained information about location, what else did they, directions, meal sites. We gave them all the information. And then it has definitely grown our resources. I mean, we have everybody from UNM intensive case managers working with us, LifeLink, and LifeLink is, they help, I mean, with anything with the guests, anything that the guest needs, housing, Medicaid, Medicare, anything they help with. And then we also work with behavioral health with Central Savila. And then they take on, Central Savila has caseworkers that they take on guests, a part of their workload. And then they take them on and help them with anything they need as far as appointments, housing, anything from there.
And Neva, if I'm a guest at the Westside, now that your outreach team is kind of inward focusing, and I need some behavioral health services, how do I reach out to you and how do I get connected? What does that look like?
So if you're a guest here and you need help and you just want to reach out to someone, definitely the guests, we make it known every day, like let your monitor know that's in the dorm with you all day, like let them know you want to speak with one of the outreach members. And as soon as that gets communicated, the outreach member will go out, grab the guest and take them and sit with them one-on-one and, kind of discuss what their needs are and their wants and, where they want to go from here. And from there, the outreach member will then determine which resource we're going to point them to, depending on what their needs are and their wants are. And then we'll get them connected. And from there, we hope the best.
And that's been through phone calls as well as we've experimented with telehealth. We've used, we've had iPad tablets and I think now as there's some more mobility allowed by the CDC and the State Department of Health, we're able to schedule those appointments and then alert the receiving agency that somebody's on schedule to come and receive some of those scheduled services. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. We have 8 iPads right now that guests can use when they need them for appointments, for behavioral health. Another good resource we have is when First Nations comes on Wednesdays in the evening. We have a clinic with First Nations and they come for about 2 to 3 hours in the evening and they bring a behavioral health specialist with them. And then even herself can get them connected and she'll sit with them and get all their notes down and then she'll get with the outreach team and help us get them connected.
Excellent. Well, that's kind of the nuts and bolts and the scaffolding of what we do out there. It's a little more cut and dry when we share it in these type of forums. And so I'm really honored and excited to have our guest with us, Mr. Bob Belanoff. I never know if I get your name right. Is that okay? Thank you, Bob. Bob, he's filmed what he calls a testament to the hidden Albuquerque caring. What Bob did, and I'll turn it over to you, Bob, to just share your time, but he was volunteering his time at the Westside Emergency Housing Center and used his skills to capture in film in a documentary the essence of life in real time. And Bob, I'd love if you talk about how did you start volunteering? And then when you saw what you saw, and I think if you could talk about how that impacted you and led you to this project. And then a reminder, those listening, you can put questions in the chat for either Liz, Neva, myself, or Bob. And I'll turn it over to you, Bob.
Good to see you, Dennis and Kim, and all of you. I stumbled upon the homeless shelter. I live on the West Side, and a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go on a tour one day. And I'm a documentary filmmaker. I work with health departments all over, and I went and saw the facility, and I said, "This is really interesting." And I came back that night, and I kind of ended up in and out for about a month with Robert LaCour and Carlos, and you guys were just wonderful. You allowed me to film. There's no crew, there's no lights, there's no sound. There's just me and a camera. And you talked, Liz, about a day in the life. And so I captured and put together a day and a night in the shelter and made it into a film. And the film is playing film festivals now. It's playing in Santa Fe and it's playing this weekend, etc. The most important part, though, is that I made 2 versions. One is a 15-minute version, which is more for film festivals, and one's a 30-minute version, which was could be for PBS. I think the story is so fantastic because it is what I discovered there I originally thought I would make a story about the homeless, the people who were there, the guests. But what I discovered was that the people, the staff was the real story, and that there was a kind of magic going on there. And I tried to identify why that was happening, but I ended up making that the story, that this was an incredible, caring community, but highly, highly functional. And that's what blew me away, because there are so many people who care but are not creating functional organizations. And I thought this was just spectacular. And I just want to take a parentheses here, but I think there are a few reasons for this. One is that because people come in and out over the course of the morning, they leave and they come back at night, there's a lot of need for communication and organization, and people need to talk to one another. So they already have to function and work together, and caring becomes a very real thing, not just a caring, it's a have to make this happen. And also the idea that the Westside shelter was isolated from some of the other things going on created this community. And I would like to see return to it. Like a year ago, we were talking maybe about showing this at the Guild or on PBS. I think it's an incredible fundraiser. And I think people in Albuquerque need to know what is going on there. And now that this pandemic is over, I'd like to return to some of the ideas we were talking about before. And I encourage anybody who if you want to see the film, I can tell you how, or we'll figure that out.
Yeah, Bob, if you could put that in the chat link. Do you have a link to the video? Is that
what
possible?
I'll do is I'll put my email in the chat, and then just send me an email and I'll send a link.
That would be great.
I come out of the background of corporate culture, businesses and advertising and marketing and stuff like that. And what I found was a culture of caring that, and I've been in healthcare for a long time, that I haven't seen ever in a lot of places. And I still want to know, and I'm not sure where that comes from. I think it might come from the Opportunity Center. I don't know, we've talked a little bit about the origin of how people begin to develop this really heartfelt ability to care and do. But I'd like to explore that some, and I'd like to also see that other people see this film, not just festivals, but the community.
Bob,
Yes,
I love your sharing that, from a leadership perspective. I get to see and know firsthand how amazing staff are. It's hard to communicate that, and you do that so well, just in your words here, your very kind words. And it's going to be the clip that I share with all staff, just to remind us that, because we're hunkered down and we don't see the outside picture sometimes, and that is so encouraging. And I really am grateful to you for those kind words.
Yeah, I've never really, I've been in a lot of helping situations and organizations, but there was something special going on. And it's also a privilege, like this weekend. So these festivals are all over. Every college town has a festival. This weekend, Miami, Oklahoma, the Westside Shelter, a full 30-minute version will play at the film festival there. And I'm not going because I don't feel pandemic free yet. And Oklahoma is probably not the first place I want, but it's playing there. And that's exciting that you guys will be featured for other people to see how it's done. I like that.
Well, we thank you for that. And those of you that join us from month to month on these educational cafes, if you'll recall, a few months back or 2 months ago, we had a session on our new core values that we've implemented over the past year. And those not only reflect who we hope we are, but who we aspire to become. And those core values, I think, are a testament also to what Bob is sharing, is that we strive to be person-centered. We have unwavering integrity, that we have deliberate care and kindness, that we have agility, and we have one other one. Kim, what is it?
It's inclusivity.
Yes, thank you. Inclusivity. Pop quiz. So, as we continue to live those out, things like this is one of those serendipitous moments where community gets a glimpse into what's happening in the community and then is able to give back. And so we welcome that, Bob. So any questions? We're down to about 5 minutes before the half hour is up. And if I could remind Bob, while we're looking for any questions, to type your email into the chat, and people can email you to get a link to those 2 videos.
Will you guys share a story that sort of reflects what makes you passionate about coming to work every day? Is it the clients? Is it the staff you work with? Is it a combination? And sort of tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I can tell, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I can tell, okay. I can speak for myself in that when I was growing up, the message at home was always, if you are able to do something for another person, it's your duty to do that. And so that was always instilled in me. And so providing service to the community in one capacity or the other was a sort of a natural career move, you know, and so that's for me has spurred me to continue to do this sort of work for many years. And those experiencing homelessness have always had a place in my heart. You know, the mission of Heading Home has felt very like my mission. And so, and you know, the staff is wonderful. It's a challenging job. It's not glamorous. It's not pretty. And it takes somebody who is really committed to what the work that they do here to hang around. It can be frustrating. It can be aggravating. There are a lot of moving parts that don't always come together. And so, you know, I try to remind staff to sort of transcend their frustrations and take a step back when you just want to scream, you know, and just take a step back and a breath and think, okay, you know, what am I here for? I'm here to listen to someone, to listen to a person, to provide service to them. And, you know, none of us are perfect, but it's a special place. It's a special job. It's a special, it's a very special thing that we do for the community. So I'm really happy to be a part of it. And I you know, the rest of my staff is also very happy to be a part of it. Neva?
So yeah, Neva, you could share yours, and then looking at our time, we have one question for you, Liz, after Neva, and that would be, what's the one most important thing you want people to know about the Westside Emergency Housing Center? So we'll go to you, Liz, after Neva shares. What's your inspiration?
Yeah, my inspiration would definitely, not only is it the guests coming to work every day, you know, everyone is always, for the most part, smiling in here, but I've said it 100 times and I'll say it again, the staff put their heart into their job, and when they come to work, they put the guests first, and they want the best for the guests when they come to work. And, you know, seeing them come to work and just have that motivation behind them is motivating for me to come to work every day and want the best for everybody as well.
Great. And just, Bob, if it's okay with you, I'm going to also add that email link to the Facebook group.
Good.
We have folks watching there. Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay, I'll do that. And Liz, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was going to say I put the whole movie on Facebook, but I can't do that because that creates that I can, yeah.
You can direct them to where they need to go.
I could put a trailer on there and that, anyway, we'll figure that out.
Oh,
Okay.
we might do that. That'd be fun. And then it's 5 o'clock or just almost there. Liz, I'm going to let you take us out on what is the one thing, and this is a question from Helen on Facebook. What's the most important thing you want people to know about the Westside Emergency Housing Center?
It's really important that people in the community remember that what we do here and who we serve, and that it's very easy, I think, for the community to forget sort of those that are experiencing homelessness, those who are sort of on the fringes and who have been marginalized. And it's really important that everyone remember that we have human beings that live out here and that we provide service to because they need our assistance, and that the assistance that they get and the resources that we afford them should be the same across the board regardless. And I feel very strongly about that, and I feel very protective of those that are here at the Westside, and because I don't like to see them not get what they need. So just remember that there are people that live out here and we provide service to, and just remember that.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We hope you join us next time.
Excellent. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.